120 degrees in the shade. No rain for an entire year. The Turpan Basin in western China is one of the most brutal landscapes on Earth, and yet some of the sweetest grapes in all of Asia grow right here. Lush vineyards, fat melons, green fields stretching across the sand. No electric pumps, no plastic pipes, no municipal water. Just an invisible underground river that has been flowing non-stop for over 3,000 years. How is that possible? The answer lies in a water system so elegant, so quietly powerful, that ancient civilizations used it to turn dead deserts into gardens of abundance, feeding millions of people with nothing but gravity and patience. But here is the part that should make every gardener sit up straight. This same kind of knowledge, the simple act of catching rain on your own property, was actually banned by law in parts of the United States. Collecting the rain that fell on your own roof could get you fined. Why would any government outlaw free water? What were they protecting? And who were they protecting it for? More importantly, what can a backyard gardener do right now, this weekend, to bring this ancient miracle home? That is exactly what this video is about. And by the end, the way rain hits your yard will never look quite the same again. Part 1. The whispering tunnels of the deadliest desert. The Turpan Basin. The hottest corridor in China. Summer temperatures routinely crack 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and there is no shade to hide in. Less than 1 inch of rain falls here in an entire year. By every modern measure, nothing should survive. But beneath the scorching sand, something remarkable has been happening for over 3 millennia. Water is moving, silently, steadily, in total darkness. More than 2,500 years ago, ancient Persian engineers perfected a technology called the Qanat, a passive, gravity-fed water system that traveled the Silk Road all the way to China, where it became known as the Kharez. The idea was breathtakingly simple. When snow melts high in the distant mountains, the water does not stay on the surface for long. It sinks deep underground, collecting in vast, natural reservoirs called aquifers. The ancient builders understood this. Instead of fighting the desert, they went straight to the source. At the foot of the mountains, they dug what is called a mother well, a vertical shaft straight down to the water table. From there, they carved a gently sloping tunnel underground, stretching for miles and miles, all the way to their villages in the desert below. Here is the number that stops people in their tracks. In the Turpan Basin alone, there are over 3,000 miles of these hand-dug tunnels. That is longer than the distance from New York to Los Angeles, all carved by hand. And here is why the system works so brilliantly. Because the water travels deep underground, it never evaporates in the blistering summer heat. It never freezes in the bitter winter. It simply flows, cool, clean, and constant, arriving at the village as if the mountain itself were hand-delivering a gift. The precision involved is staggering. The tunnels slope at exactly 1 meter of drop for every 1,000 meters of distance. Too steep, and the rushing water would tear the walls apart. Too flat, and the water would stagnate and silt up. These engineers achieved that perfect angle in pitch darkness, using nothing more than a small bowl of water to check the level and the flicker of an oil lamp to test the airflow. And the mortar holding those tunnel walls together? Not concrete. A farmhouse recipe. Clay, lime, ash, goat hair, and egg whites, mixed into a compound called sarouge. While modern concrete bridges crack and crumble after 40 years, sarouge actually absorbs moisture and grows harder with time. It is still holding strong after 3,000 years. No electricity, no lasers, no heavy machinery, just observation, patience, and a design so perfectly aligned with the natural world that it outlasts everything built in the modern age. But Persia and China were not the only civilizations that cracked this code. On the other side of the planet, high in the mountains of South America, a completely different culture arrived at an equally astonishing solution, with a name that might just be the most beautiful phrase in all of agriculture. Part 2. Breastfeeding the mountain. 12,000 feet above sea level, the Peruvian Andes, thin air, steep rock, and rain that arrives in violent, fleeting bursts, then vanishes. When the storms hit, the water rushes down the mountainside like a river in a hurry. It strips away topsoil. It scours the slopes bare. And then it is gone, leaving the highlands parched for the long, punishing dry season. But more than 1,400 years ago, pre-Incan civilizations developed a water harvesting technique that turned this problem inside out. They called it amunas, from the native Quechua word meaning to retain. In Spanish, the practice carries an even more tender name, mamanteo. It translates roughly to breastfeeding the earth. What a phrase. And what a way to think about the relationship between people and rain. Instead of letting the floodwater escape, the ancient farmers carved stone-lined canals along the natural curves of the hillside. But here is the part that makes modern engineers do a double take. These canals were designed to leak. That was the whole point. During the wet season, the canals diverted rushing streams into areas of fractured rock and spongy soil, letting the water seep, slowly, deliberately, deep into the belly of the mountain. The mountain itself became the reservoir. And then, months later, during the driest and most desperate stretch of the year, that same water reappeared. It bubbled up in springs and streams further down the valley, cool, clean, and right on time. Modern scientists tested this using harmless tracer dyes. The results stunned them. The water stays underground for an average of 45 days. In some cases, up to 8 months. The mountain holds it like a savings account, releasing it exactly when the people below need it most. To this day, every year, local communities gather for a festival to clean and maintain those ancient canals, honoring the ancestors who built them and the rains that keep them alive. Now, catching water underground and storing it for months is impressive enough. But what if the challenge is not drought at all? What if the real enemy is frost? What if the ground freezes nearly 300 nights a year, and every crop textbook says farming should be flat out impossible? That is exactly the situation near Lake Titicaca. And the solution was, if anything, even more clever. Part 3. The Frost Defiers and the Thermal Battery, Lake Titicaca. 12,500 feet of elevation. Thin, cold air. Frost threatens crops on nearly 300 nights a year. Conventional science says, do not bother trying to farm here. The ancient Tiwanaku civilization had a different opinion. They built a vast geometric network of raised planting beds surrounded by shallow canals of water, a system known as Waru Waru. NASA satellites have photographed the remnants. At its peak, this system covered nearly 300,000 acres and fed 500,000 people. The secret sits right there in those canals. Water has a remarkable property that most people never think about. It absorbs heat from the sun during the day and releases that heat very slowly through the night. The Tiwanaku farmers used this. The shallow canals surrounding every raised bed acted as thermal batteries. When nighttime temperatures dropped below freezing, the water in those canals quietly radiated its stored warmth upward, creating a thin microclimate, just enough to keep the potato plants a few critical degrees above the frost line. No greenhouses, no heaters, no fuel, just water, doing what water does. But frost protection was only half the story. Algae and aquatic plants grew naturally in the canals. When they broke down, they produced a thick, nutrient-rich muck at the bottom. Periodically, the farmers dredged that dark sludge and spread it across their raised beds, a free, self-renewing fertilizer. No synthetic chemicals, no diesel-powered tractors, no supply chain. And the yields? When university researchers rebuilt a section of waru fields and compared them to modern conventional farming in the same region, the ancient system produced up to 400% more food. 400%. Using nothing but raised dirt and shallow water. 3 civilizations, 3 different continents, 3 radically different climates. And yet the underlying principle is identical. Do not fight the water. Work with it. Slow it down. Let the earth hold it. So the obvious question is, if these systems are this productive, this sustainable, and this elegant, why is the modern world not using them everywhere? Why, in fact, was something as simple as catching rainwater turned into a criminal act? Part 4. The hubris of the modern world. Why it was banned. This part of the story requires a deep breath, because it is not about ancient genius anymore. It is about modern choices, and the price of forgetting. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, as the American West was being settled, water was scarce and fiercely contested. The legal system developed a doctrine called prior appropriation. First in time, first in right. If a rancher or mining company was the first to divert water from a river for a so-called beneficial use, they owned the rights to that water, permanently, even if they were located hundreds of miles downstream. Under this framework, every raindrop that fell from the sky was legally considered to be on its way to a river, and therefore it already belonged to whoever held senior rights downstream. If a homeowner placed a barrel under a gutter to catch the rain landing on their own roof, the law treated that as theft. The homeowner was stealing water that belonged to someone else. For decades, in states like Colorado and Utah, collecting rain on your own property was a punishable offense. The oldest, most natural relationship between a human being and the sky had been declared illegal. At the same time, the mid-20th century brought the full force of industrial agriculture. The gentle, patient wisdom of the old ways was traded for the brute power of fossil fuels. Instead of shaping the land to catch and hold water, the strategy became dominate the water cycle. Massive wells were drilled deep into ancient aquifers, the Ogallala, for instance, beneath the American Midwest, pumping out millions of gallons with diesel and natural gas. Enormous dams and concrete channels moved water at unnatural speeds, degrading soils and disrupting ecosystems along the way. The economics were clear, even if nobody said it out loud. A farmer or gardener who catches free rain and builds their own soil fertility needs very little from the outside world. But a farmer who depends on the utility company for water, the fuel company for pumps, and the chemical company for fertilizer, that farmer generates steady, recurring revenue from multiple industries. The ancient ways did not disappear because they stopped working. They disappeared because they stopped generating profit for the system that replaced them. And the old knowledge was quietly dismissed as primitive, a relic of people who supposedly did not know any better. But knowledge like this has a way of resurfacing, and that is exactly what is happening now. Part 5. Bringing the miracle home. Here is the good news. Thanks to years of advocacy and common sense, rainwater harvesting is now legal in all 50 states. Some places like Colorado still cap how much can be collected, but the outright bans are gone. And a growing movement called permaculture, short for permanent agriculture, has been quietly resurrecting these ancient techniques and adapting them for modern backyards. The most powerful tool in the permaculture toolkit is a direct descendant of the Amunas and the Qanats. It is called a swale. This is the part of the video that can change what happens in your yard this spring, so pay close attention. A swale is simply a shallow trench dug along the contour of the land. Contour means a line where every point sits at exactly the same elevation. Walking along it, a person is neither going uphill nor downhill. Perfectly level. Dig a shallow trench along that contour line. Pile the loose dirt on the downhill side to form a soft mound, called a berm. That is it. That is the entire structure. When rain falls, the water flowing downhill hits the trench. Because the trench is perfectly level, the water does not flow away. It stops. It pools gently. And then it does exactly what it did in the Andes 1400 years ago. It sinks, slowly and deeply, into the earth. Fruit trees, berry bushes, and perennial flowers go right on the berm, the mound of dirt below the trench. As the water sinks underground, it creates a broad, hidden moisture plume. The roots of those plants reach down into it, drinking deeply for weeks after the last rain. Consider this: 1 inch of rain falling on a quarter-acre lot equals over 6,700 gallons of water. Without a swale, most of that water sheets off across the surface, carrying precious topsoil and nutrients with it into the street and the storm drain. With a swale, that water stays, stored for free, right where the roots need it. Finish the system with a thick blanket of wood chip mulch over the bare soil. The mulch shields the ground from the sun, slashing evaporation. As it breaks down, it feeds earthworms and beneficial fungi, slowly transforming hard, tired dirt into dark, living soil. And here is what most people never hear. A basic swale can be built in a single weekend with nothing but a shovel and a simple A-frame level made from scrap wood. No tractor, no contractor, no special equipment, just a willingness to work with the land instead of against it. The ancient Persians carved tunnels in total darkness. The pre-Incan highlanders taught a mountain to hold water. The Tiwanaku farmers turned shallow canals into thermal batteries and fertilizer factories. 3 words run through every one of these systems: slow it, spread it, sink it. That is the oldest water management principle on Earth. And it still works, in a backyard, on a hillside, in a raised bed behind the garage. Digging a simple swale, catching rain in a barrel, covering bare soil with mulch. These are not quaint hobbies. They are quiet declarations of independence from a fragile, expensive industrial water system. They are a return to the way human beings have partnered with the rain for thousands of years. A garden built on this principle will shelter birds and bees, grow food without a monthly water bill, and keep on thriving long after the shovel is hung up for the last time. Slow it, spread it, sink it, and watch what grows. If this story stirred something, share it with someone who loves the soil as much as you do. Subscribe to Rooted in Grace and leave a comment below. What is the first thing you plan to change in your garden this year? Until next time, may your soil stay moist, your roots run deep, and your garden always remain rooted in grace.